Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That is full. This is full. The full is taken out of the full. Take out the full from the full, and the full remains. That's the logic of the infinite. The reality is inexhaustible. The manifestation of that reality also is inexhaustible. And the characteristic feature of that reality is bliss. Bliss is another form of love. Where there is love, there is bliss, there is joy. There are a number of aphorisms by a very ancient sage on devotion. They are called aphorisms on devotion by sage Narada, who is also significantly the originator of the science of sound, science of music. In his very first aphorism, he enunciates true devotion, true love is causeless. Ahaituki bhakti. That which has a cause is not really true devotion, true love. When we pray, we have something to ask. Maybe we do not ask for worldly gifts. We may ask for peace. We may ask for health. We may not even ask for that. We may ask for liberation. We may ask for freedom. But even that is a cause. A true lover of God loves because it is God. A true lover, even in our human context, loves because one can't help loving. Mother was always amused when people spoke of causes of love. She said, how can there be a cause? One loves because one can't help loving. The mind loves where there is affinity of ideas, affinity of understanding, it flows there. The emotions are a camouflage for desire. The vital has always a craving, a need to assert itself under the name of love. The love of the vital or the emotional being is never disinterested. There is always some interest. The body loves the form. The body is attracted to beauty, elegance, or whatever, a physical attraction. Love comes afterwards. It is only the soul, what we call the psychic being, that can love without motive. And the aim, the central thrust of this phase of spiritual life is to arrive at the soul, to awaken the soul as an active force in our daily life. We all know that we have a soul. It is there, but it is not active. It doesn't rule. It doesn't influence us. It can be active. It can be dynamic. It can assert itself only if we build around ourselves a climate of the soul. And that climate is a climate of harmony, kindness, understanding, compassion, beauty. Where there is ugliness, where there is grossness, where there is crudity, where one has not yet emerged from the belt of animality, one has not truly arrived at manhood. To awake to the soul, to establish the Godhead of the soul in life, is the true manhood of man. The soul always witnesses. It does not interfere. The soul witnesses, watches, like a parent observing its child, the external nature, external being, and gives a long rope. Often the stupidities, the grossnesses of the external being deeply hurt the soul. The soul weeps. The soul is sad. Whenever we have an unaccountable sadness about us for no apparent reason, make sure that it is not due to any external frustration, disappointment, but if there is that brooding sadness, it is time you look into yourself and know that it is the psychic sadness at the bestiality of the external being. I remember an incident. Once a young man came in our ashram unannounced just after the, I think, end of the Second World War, and he said he was a pilot of the Indian Air Force, and he had come to the ashram because he had heard of it, and he started telling many stories and exploits during the war. So all our school children flocked round him, made a hero of him, took him to the mother and told the Air Force pilot has arrived and we have brought him to receive your blessings. So mother went out of her way to receive him because that was not the time when she would receive visitors. And she gave him unusual length of time. She was very kind, and everyone was struck that mother was pouring so much of love, so much of compassion through her eyes and hands on him. And that man became overnight a hero in our ashram. And he became very popular. Every day mother would receive him 2 times, 3 times and spend some time with him. Then 4th day or 5th day he showed a telegram saying that he has been called suddenly by the headquarters, and he left. Next day in newspapers we read that so and so, a young man, had been arrested for impersonating as an Air Force pilot, and there were a number of forged documents with him and all that. So naturally our people got intrigued. How? Mother with a spiritual consciousness, and in our experience it was a divine consciousness. How could she be fooled by this young man? We could be fooled, but how could she be fooled? And she gave so much of time. So we asked mother, how is it this has come in papers like this? She smiled and she said, look here, when that man came to me, his soul came out of his body, fell at my feet and wept and wept at the blackness of the external being. He was so gross, he was so black, dark, that the soul was feeling suffocated. And I was trying to help the soul by spending time with him, putting my love, trying to bring it up and make a passage for it. I knew, the soul told me how dark his being was. This is, I am illustrating this to show how the soul, though it is a witness, also feels the wrong things that we do. It is happy when we are in the inward or upward or happy moments. The soul doesn't care for your traditional moral values, virtue and vice. It has its different standards. And very often the soul just retires if we are too crude, if we are too dark and irrevocably given to the lower type of life. The soul retires inside, and it is at such times that evil beings who want to influence earth life without taking birth here, they enter, they first hover around that person, goad him on into his evil ways, and when he is firmly possessed, they push out the soul and occupy the body. The soul lives, the body may live, but the body is inhabited by some other evil beings. The same thing happens when often we find a person goes in a coma, and we say he lives for 30 days and 40 days. Very often the soul leaves, and some other beings come and occupy the body to have that experience. So the soul plays a very great part in our journey to the divine. You might be wondering why I speak of divine and not of God, and there is this reason. The word God, by usage, by notions, has come to represent a being who punishes. We rarely associate grace and love with God of religions. We have fear, We have developed awe, and God punishes. The divine has a different connotation. We must know that the reality is both personal and impersonal. When it takes a personal form, it is God. When it is impersonal, it is the reality, having certain features like peace, consciousness, delight, knowledge, power, and so on. The word divine includes both these aspects of the reality. God personal and the reality impersonal. Now, we spoke of creating a climate for the soul to come out, and that is by developing the higher side of life. All art, all music, all aesthetic activities are designed to surround the person with the right vibrations which draw out the soul. That our society has vulgarized these things, brought down music and art to a very low level, pandering to the vital tastes, is another matter, and that is part of the system which we have to change. But a person who is awakened must spend some time searching for the soul, and it is not an external solitude but an inner solitude. You may be in the midst of 1,000 people, but inside you must be alone. There is a line in Savitri where Sri Aurobindo says, "The soul that can live alone with itself meets God." You must never miss company. If company is there, very well. If company is not there, you are by yourself. To learn to be by yourself, to live in your own atmosphere in the midst of a crowd, that is a must in spiritual life, and particularly in a country like this, where the tempo of life is so fast, where everything goes so in a crowded way. An inner solitude, not an outer solitude, is a requirement. And as we fill our life with movements of harmony, devotion, selflessness, that is very important. Selfishness is the enemy of the soul. We have to be selfless. Only then we find our unity with others, with God. And this discipline is something to be inbuilt in our daily life, in our homes, in our places where we live. We must start exercising this discipline. It is not that we will pray for 1 hour or meditate for 2 hours and we live spiritual life. No. Right from morning to evening, every moment, Mother says, you are confronted with a choice. Every moment, maybe in small matters or big matters, whether you choose the way, the hard way that leads you to God, or the easy way that leads you downwards. Each moment we have to exercise our choice. Each of us is free. There may be a determinism, there may be a law, but it is very large and wide. But within that, each one of us has a choice to make. There is a discussion lately among scientists as to the 5th dimension. You know, the 3 dimensions: length, height and breadth. Is that right, Tom? 3 dimensions normally: length, breadth and depth or height. The fourth dimension has been recognized to be time. Now, there is a thinking that there is the fifth dimension is the freedom of each individual to choose, to decide where he will put his foot next. You will put your foot on the right side or the left side. It is left to you. And that choice of freedom, that freedom of choice is the fifth dimension. Mother says that there are really 12 dimensions. And it is only as our consciousness develops, as man evolves, that he will discover what are these dimensions. But at the moment we are speaking of the fifth dimension. In our dealings with children, in our dealings with members of the house, in our dealings with colleagues, everywhere we have to function from a spiritual poise. Always conscious that we have to function in terms of the soul, in terms of the psychic. It is only then that the soul comes forward and assumes its rightful place. The true soul displaces the external desire soul, and this soul, the psychic, is in direct contact, in direct link with the Supreme. It is not enough to realize the psychic. It is the first step. It is called realization of the individual divine. In each one of us there is a divine consciousness deep inside, individualized, accepting our external nature. To realize it is the first step, but it is not enough. In older traditional disciplines, it was enough to realize union with the inner divine, and they never bothered with external nature. They said anyway external nature is irrelevant, and you could see many crudities, many unspiritual things being said or done by people who are said to have realized God. But here we have no option. Nature also has to be divinized. Nature has to be spiritualized. So the next step is to recast our entire nature in terms of the psychic, to govern, orientate our external movements of the body, life and mind in terms of the psychic, in terms of the soul. And that's the beginning of a transformation of our nature. The external nature must be in tune with the inner soul, the inner being. And it is then that love outflowers. The person has no doubts of anything. He never is worried about by what people call pain or suffering, because he sees the divine sense in everything. Ultimately, it is the divine sanction, the divine love that supports everything. Even pain and suffering have a meaning, as we observed yesterday, because there is a supporting love. And till we learn to participate in this divine love that looms over the universe, that fills the universe at a certain level, we cannot hope to grow into a divine consciousness. And that can be done only at the level of the soul. We have to discover ourselves in our soul. That's the third phase. And once you find your true center, the divine center, there is a spontaneous outflow. The circumference that you call yourself goes on widening, and there is an effortless cosmicization, universalization of your being. Because at the level of the soul, you contact everybody at the level of their soul, and you feel oneness. Oneness is not a mental concept. It is not something to be achieved by political means. Oneness is already there at the level of the spirit, at the level of the soul. So each one has to dig into himself or herself and arrive at that level where the unity, where the oneness is self-evident. And once one does it, individual man is on the way to become universal man. That's the next step in our evolution. We cannot remain hereafter. This time spirit is pressing, and it is going to precipitate us into a new poise of universal beings. Man cannot be a superman, man cannot be a divine man unless he first becomes a universal man. The mind, the heart, the interests have to be universalized. But there is a danger. If we start doing that before we realize our true soul, our true spiritual center, it is the ego that aggrandizes itself. And there are people who honestly believe that they are doing good to humanity, and they are putting their own image. There was Hitler, there was Stalin, there were so many who honestly believed that they were doing good and right. Actually, it was the ego that was universalizing itself, not the soul. So, to try to universalize oneself before one arrives at the soul is very dangerous, because one may be caught in the trap of the ego. This is the moment of universalization. Everything that happens in life, we have to develop a habit, a discipline of considering in the universal context. At the moment, everything that happens, our first reaction is to consider how does it affect me. It is good if it is favorable in its results on me. I dislike it if its results are bad for me. We never think of its overall effects. So this is an egoistic standpoint which has to be thinned out and gradually developed into a larger and a larger perspective till it embraces the whole universe. And the next moment is when you come to the mind. Man is a mental being. We all have to think and translate everything in mental terms before we react. But our mind, what is our mind? Our mind is something like an open marketplace where always thoughts, ideas, concepts go on jostling. We think. But 90% of our thoughts are not our own. We read, we listen, we see, everywhere we go on absorbing known and unknown to us thoughts of other people, concepts from other people. Also, each time I think something here, these thoughts go in the universal atmosphere and float. And anybody going somewhere, he may just pick it up without knowing, and he may think it is his own thought. So 90% of our thoughts are not our own. So much so that Sri Aurobindo says, man does not think, he is thought. Similarly, feelings. Our feelings arising from ourselves are very few. They are all in the atmosphere like radio waves, and we pick them up. We never examine from where they have come. So the mind, which is intended to be an instrument for knowledge. Mind doesn't have knowledge. Mind is intended to be an instrument for knowledge. But it is so chaotic, so disorganized, so much at the mercy of every external impact, every emotion, vital life movement from below, that we can never know what the mind will think next. And the mind is completely dominated by our vital interests. It rarely sees the truth as it is. Its vision, its interpretation, its understanding is always colored in our favor. It is mostly wrong. And the mind keeps us a prisoner. Mind is not therefore the last term of our evolution. There is a facile tendency to say that man is the crown of evolution of nature and he is the last term. He is the king of nature. No, he is a slave of nature. Mind is a very crude instrument as it is. So, when we want to develop ourselves integrally, we first start by trying to silence the mind. The mind has to be silenced. The flow, the chaotic flow over which we have no control, has to be checked. Normally we are not conscious, but there are disciplines, there are processes for taking hold of the mind and gradually control it, make it silent. One of them is meditation, another is concentration, another is self-observation. The aim of all these is to not only to calm the restlessness of the mind, but tune it to something else. The mind, instead of being tuned to the impacts of the external world, is to be turned inside, tuned to the soul, or turned upwards, tuned to the spirit. Then it receives the workings of an inner or a deeper consciousness. And how do we do it? Whenever you ask people to meditate, they come the next day and say that we get too many thoughts. We never had so many thoughts in our normal life. But when we sit down, we find too many thoughts. Actually, the thoughts are always there. But we are too busy, we are too preoccupied with many things to be aware of the thought flow. When you sit, you get a chance to observe yourself and you become aware of the thoughts which are already there. So the thoughts, distracting thoughts, have become a bugbear which they need not be. There are 3 or 4 methods to deal with the situation. One, what was recommended by Swami Vivekananda, is to let the thoughts flow. You just don't do anything. Let them flow, but you don't participate in the thoughts. You are just an observer. And the flow of thoughts will continue and continue, showing many sides of yourself, many corners of your own nature, which need to be corrected. And gradually, in the absence of your participation, the thought flow slows down and comes to a standstill, leaving a silent mind. It takes long time. There is another process, and that is to treat each thought as an intruder and shut it out. Keep it out. It is a very difficult and laborious process, but It does succeed if we have the patience and the endurance for it. The third way is to ignore the thoughts. When the thoughts come, you just don't attend to them. You have an objective, you have a purpose for meditation, and you occupy yourself with that, with your central mind. On the peripheries of the mind, let the thoughts flow. They do not disturb you. Just as when we are talking, we have a transaction of speaking and hearing. There are other sounds that come. We register them, we are aware of them, but they do not interfere with our transaction. So, you just ignore the thoughts. Let them play about on the surface, but you concentrate upon the object of your meditation. God as peace, God as beauty, God as love, or quest to the soul, or opening to the divine spirit above, whatever it is. There are so many themes, and according to your goal, according to the theme of your concentration, is the type of meditation. But this operation of ignoring the thoughts and concentrating centrally on what you want to realize leads gradually to what is called bifurcation of consciousness. Your consciousness splits into two. There is an external consciousness, and there is the bulk of the consciousness within, always restful, always watching, always turned to the divine. And an external consciousness which mechanically deals with routine things. This bifurcation of consciousness is operative not only during hour of meditation, but in active life. So in the midst of life, you can be concentrated in a different consciousness. This is a type of meditation. Concentration is different. In meditation, you allow your consciousness to flow step by step and work out a theme. But in concentration, there is a fixation. You just fix to a point, fix to a form, fix to an idea, fix to an ideal, fix to a sound, and don't budge. That is called concentration. Meditation is where you start with concentration, but then you relax and allow the consciousness to flow in that direction, undistracted by other pulls. Another way is what is called opening. You gather all your faculties, all your energies, and turn them in the direction of what you want, and wait without resisting, without anticipating, without wanting a particular experience. You just wait with faith, and things happen. If you are open and wait for something to reveal itself from inside, you get a pull, like a magnetic pull. If it is from above, you feel a kind of descent. Something comes from above, and you feel what it is to be open. But you have to take care to be open only to the right things, and not to anything and everything that comes by. That is where discrimination is called for. By all these means, Mother used to say that it is wrong to try to empty the mind. You must fill it with the right things. Mind is full of wrong movements. You have to displace the wrong movements with the right movements. And that is a more natural way of evolving the mind. of letting the mind flow towards what it seeks. And once the mind is quieted, we make a habit of sitting alone or in company, quietly, concentrated upon the object we seek, intensely aspiring. A condition is created by which things start happening. The higher peace, the higher consciousness, the higher silence start descending into us, and we feel a quiet, we feel a peace, we feel a detachment. But that's not enough. The attitude that we develop in meditation has to be prolonged in active life. There has always to be an attitude of meditation all the 24 hours. Something in us must be always turned inward or upward, whatever activity we are doing. And that way, the mind starts receiving the workings of higher consciousness, and instead of the labored operations of the intellect, we start opening to the operation of higher faculties like intuition, like illumination, like revelation, like inspiration, like seizure of truth in a moment. All these faculties are waiting for man to come up, just as it has taken millions of years to come from the ape mind to the thinking mind of ours today. There are many stages still to be traversed, from our thinking mind to the divine mind, which has all the knowledge that one needs, has all the willpower to effectuate that knowledge, and to evolve from our thinking mind into this what is called the truth mind is the aim of the present cycle of human evolution. What has started with the stone, with fragmented matter, culminates in the evolution of man into a divine man, human into the divine, human nature into the divine nature. All life is to be organized in terms of this truth. Nothing is to be excluded. Everything has to be taken, given its right value, and integrated with the rest. Exclusivism is foreign to spiritual consciousness. You should include everything, but everything in its right place. A sense of proportion, a sense of harmony must prevail. And all these are different phases, not to be done one after the other, but they all are to be built simultaneously. It can never happen that we will complete the perfection of the physical and then go to the perfection of the soul, or psychic, or perfection of the mind. Now, all these four movements, fourfold perfection, they start simultaneously, and they have to be laboriously in the beginning and spontaneously as things move forward, built and organized in our life. So, everything that has taken place has a meaning, has a role. To expose the dark corners, we have to see and correct them. Everything depends upon our sight, our approach, our attitude. And that is where we are. Now you can ask questions.
In the book for Superman, Aurobindo says that he was talking about Nietzsche, and he says, he gives him compliments, but then he says that he was like an oracle, that he would say things that had some truth in it, but then the people would hear it wrongly. Can you comment on that?
Yes, Aurobindo describes Nietzsche as a prophet who did not understand his own message. Some truths descend and try to express themselves. We catch it in our own terms, deform it. And Nietzsche's conception of Superman was a magnified, vital man, asserting his will, imposing his will, and he considered love and kindness as all weaknesses. So he spoke of the blonde beast, that is a titan. His ideal was a titan and not a god. The real Superman, into which man is to evolve, is a divine man, where all the animality is gone and only the divine consciousness is embodied.
You've spoken to us little stories and in other ways of your teacher, the mother. Would you say a few words about the mother for us?
Ah, yes. The mother came from France, and when she was a child, even at the age of 4 and 5, she was seeing a light descending from above. But she could not ask what it was to her mother, because her own mother was a self-confessed materialist who always said that people who speak of these things should be sent to the psychiatrist. So this girl did not ask her mother what it was, but she has instinctively felt that must be God, that must be the divine. And she yoked herself to that light, which she realized later to be divine consciousness. And she was conscious that she had a mission to fulfill. But what the mission was, she did not know. And what she did from the age of 5 was to do nothing without reference to that light, to that divinity, which was always hovering round her head. And from the age of 11 or 12, every day in sleep, a number of occult and spiritual teachers would come and teach her how to build the inner life. And some of them she was to meet later on earth. At the age of 13, for about 6 months, she had a unique experience, and that is the moment she went to bed, she would find herself floating above. She had a golden robe, and she would go high and high till the robe covered the entire town where she was living. And men, women and children would come from all sides in distress. And the moment they touched this robe, they were healed, and they would go back smiling. She observed on her left side at that time an old man standing encouraging her. She was later to know that he was the man of sorrows, old man of sorrows. And she found it highly interesting, and the activities of the day seemed to her very uninteresting compared to this experience, where people would be healed and their suffering relieved when they came and touched the robe. It was that time she realized that one of the missions of her life was to carry succor to the distressed, to the people who are suffering. But she also knew that it required a strength which was not human, and she went on, tried to discover that strength in herself. She attained by the age of 18 a state of constant union with the inner presence of God. But how to proceed further she did not know. At that time she came across a French translation of Vivekananda's lectures in America on Raja Yoga. And she was amazed that somebody could say in such detail, give directions to how to build the inner divine consciousness, how to go to the self. And she said she finished in 1 month what would have taken years for her otherwise. And later, another Indian, after a year or two, gave her an imperfect translation of the Bhagavad Gita and told her, read this book and regard Krishna of the Gita as the indwelling deity, indweller, and surrender to him. And mother says she followed it literally, and the whole thing was done in record time. And it was thereafter that she met a remarkable occultist called Paul Thion. He was a Polish Jew with an English wife from the Isle of Wight. They were highly advanced occultists who felt that they had a role to play in bringing about the kingdom of God on earth, that a divine manifestation is due to take place on earth, and conditions have to be created, and they were proceeding in an occult way. Mother was gifted with certain occult powers from the childhood, and circumstances so shaped things that she went with them to Algeria to learn further occultism. This lady, the wife of Theon, she was so proficient in occult knowledge and practice that she could come out of her body, leave the physical body, come out of the subtle physical body, leave it aside, thus come out 12 times, leave out 12 bodies, and go into the place without forms. You have to divest yourselves of so many sheaths to go into the world of no form, origin of creation. And she taught that to the mother. There were a number of techniques which mother learned from her. Once, for instance, when they were coming back, that lady, when she was tired, fatigued, because of these subtle experiments, subtle projections, out of body experiences, she would not take food as such. Once she called her to bring a grapefruit. In Algeria, in Africa, they have huge grapefruits. So a big grapefruit was brought. She lay down on the bed and she put it on her abdomen. And she said, you come back after 45 minutes. And when this girl went there, she found that the whole grapefruit had shrunk to the size of a lemon. You call it lemon or lime?
Lemon.
Lemon. And her face was blooming. That was how, without eating food, she could draw sustenance, energy from outside. And that is what mother learned. She rarely took food in the sense we take. And she said, I take food as a concession to the law of nature. I really take sustenance from the universal life force. Once you are open to it, it comes. You don't need physical food. But the physical body is subject to the laws of physical nature. So she would take something, half a glass of grape juice or whatever it is, mashed rice a little bit. So she learnt, and once when they were returning from Algeria to France on a boat, at that time there were no planes. It was in the first decade of the present century. And there was a huge storm. And everybody rushed down from the deck. All people were merrymaking. They were all afraid. The captain started shaking his head. So this Theo, the master, she called her. Her name was Mira. She said, go and stop the storm. So Mira goes up to the deck, finds it deserted, and goes into her subtle body into the atmosphere, higher atmosphere, and finds a lot of these elemental beings enjoying themselves, creating the storm, creating confusion, and waiting for the ship to sink. And immediately she said, "What are you doing here? Stop it." And they stopped, and the storm abated, and everything became all right. So this was a daily experience. She had got not only a spiritual consciousness, but a matching occult power. You know, only spiritual consciousness, without the power to materialize it, without the power to organize it, is important. Only occult power, without the requisite spiritual knowledge, spiritual enlightenment, spiritual consciousness, is a dangerous weapon. It is blind power. She was unique in this. Both were combined. The occult powers, but they were all exercised for the good of humanity, for the further evolution of the human race. And she came to India because in her experience, she once, when she was in a studio in Paris, somebody was talking of certain occult experiences. At that time, the whole past of her own past in different lives was revealed to her, and it was also revealed that the Supreme is due to manifest now, and something of that was in India. And since then she was on the lookout for the teacher in India who believed in the manifestation of the Supreme and not rejection of the world. She had the conviction and the faith and the vision that God, the divine, not only exists, but he can be reached, and he is to be manifested on earth. Humanity has arrived at a stage where it is not enough to pray to God. God is not to be there to be worshipped, but God is to be lived. God is to be organized in life. This hiatus between material life and spiritual life has to be healed, and we are on the verge of that. And that's what he felt. And she said, after a lot of experience working, she worked in India for 50 years. She was the first person to give, a spiritual person in India, to give equality to men and women. And she organized a center of education. She said, I want to liberate not only man, not only women, but also children from the tyranny of their ignorant parents. And she organized a school where, there are 700 children with great individual attention paid to them by about 150 teachers from the ashram who give their services naturally in an honorary free way. And the children are watched, observed, and helped to grow in the line in which their temperament, their nature is inclined. Naturally, certain subjects, certain things are compulsory. That is necessary in languages, mathematics, science, but by and large, they are given freedom to choose after a certain age the subjects that they want. And that is possible for us because we are not affiliated to any university. We are not sought recognition from anybody because we want to have freedom, autonomy. And one thing is, there is no fee for education in the center. She said, I do not want to sell education. It is too sacred a thing to be sold. So children are given free education. The teachers teach free. And there are no degrees, no diplomas. And by the age of 21, they complete a certain course of education. It is not a religious education, not a spiritual education, but these ideals are in the background. The stress is on the development of the inner personality. And that is how she developed. And she believed in the new consciousness. And she said, pointing to America, I have an impression that the new thing will start there. And that is now your responsibility.
Is it, this could not be said in all assemblies like this, but it can be said here because we are aware of the sacrifice
Yes.
and generosity of your coming here. Is it possible that the way is not hard, the spiritual way, but that if Jesus said, my burden is light, my task is easy, is it not possible that when the greed and money aspect come into so much of the spiritual so-called teaching, that it is for the aggrandizement and power and money of the priest and teacher, but that it may be more easy than we suspect, but it is presented as difficult,
Yeah.
so that people can make money from it.
That's right. That is the tragedy. You know, there is such a seeking, such an awakening among the American people that it is being exploited by many so-called teachers. They have commercialized spirituality. And the credulity of an average American in these matters, he is very efficient, very clever in monetary matters, business matters, practical matters, he is unsurpassed. But when it concerns spirituality, he is like a child. He believes whatever he is told. And you have to see. I was horrified to see certain films and certain documentary videos. You know, how these people are misled like this. What has happened to them? They are like children and their credulity is being exploited. Things are, sir, not difficult. Things are easy if only you know how to do it. And one doesn't need all these paraphernalia, you know, of ashrams and mutts and churches and these teachers with all those robes and things. Nothing. They are making money. They are making money. These very people who were failures in our country, who have no following, nobody would look at them. They are making money here. I know of a stenographer. A stenographer, you know, he once accompanied his boss, who was a scientist, to America, New York. He saw the field. He resigned his job. He put on red robes. He knew some of these asanas, you know, Hatha Yoga. And he has become a teacher. Next time he came, he had all these big things. I said, what has happened? He said, no, I am living in America and I am a teacher. Now, they thrive. First thing is, they promise quick results. Instant coffee, instant tea, instant realization. It never happens, you know. You have to pay hard labor. Mother used to say, miracles are always short-lived. What you achieve by miracle cannot last. It has to be done in the hard way. So TM, they speak of TM. You know, they even invited me to join their institution in Bern in Switzerland and help them participate in the research of consciousness. And naturally I did not go. But the technique is good in itself, but it is a technique for relaxation and not realization. After a time you come to a halt. You don't go further. Similarly, the attempt to recreate India of 2000 years ago, 5000 years ago in Virginia or in Texas by shaving the heads of the children, putting on Indian clothes, teaching them Sanskrit, where does it lead? What has happened to the parents? Why do they allow it? But somebody gave me an explanation. He said generally those people choose dolts, dropouts. They are not representative Americans, but you know, these idiots and such people who have no future, they join there and they are that. I don't know how far it is true, but it is that. I was told a story. In Virginia they have organized a huge place and they have got 100 cows. Now it seems there is a law in this country that whoever has these cattle, they have to be periodically examined by the government department. We call them in India veterinary department, animal hospitals. But they said, no, these are all divine cows and we will not come there. They refused to obey the law, and within 6 months 70 cows died, and the government had filed a case. I do not know what happened afterwards.
That raises a couple of questions in my mind. One of them has to do with common sense in spiritual practice, and
Yes.
the other one has to do with the importance of the individual's development as a necessary precursor for any collective development. That in many of these movements, it seems people rush into something collective before they've developed their own consciousness individually. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yes. Common sense is a must. Sri Aurobindo's one complaint was that we ask people to surrender to the divine, but they only surrender their common sense. See, common sense is a must. It is a rare faculty that is developed in evolution. And in the name of obedience, in the name of surrender, we smother common sense. It is suicidal. Everything has to be judged by common sense and related to common sense. And that common sense later develops into intuition. Common sense is a kind of a operation of intuition at a higher level, instinct at a lower level. And as we silence the mind, when the intuition starts working, you will see how common sense turns into that. That is first. Second, it is true that a minimum individual development or a seeking is necessary. But when you try to organize spirituality in daily life, it is always good to have like-minded seekers to associate with. And a collectivity promotes a special group aspiration and a group response which helps everybody. If the few who are more advanced, who are strong, through them the weaker ones are helped. So both these go side by side. We can't wait for the individual to achieve before he moves into the collectivity. It is a simultaneous process, but the individual is the key. The collectivity can advance only to the extent that the individual permits. So individually one has to work on oneself and then share it with the others in collectivity. But the individual development is prior, but up to a certain extent. It has to go on. The responsibility of the individual is more than of the collectivity. The character of the collectivity is determined by the character of the individuals constituting it. So both are necessary with a stress on the individual.
We have necessarily to, getting back to the common sense, I think I've heard you say in the past that we have to refer to the highest light that is available to us.
That's true. And that higher light, changes. But it is always, it has to be consistent with the common sense.
I think I've also heard you say that if it's a question between siding with the common sense
Yes.
and something else,
Decide with the common sense. Throw your weight on common sense.
Isn't it true that surrender at a certain point in one's development can be dangerous? That if you are working with a teacher and you surrender to his external personality.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could
It is a tradition in India that the surrender is to God in the Guru, not to the external person. And it is understood particularly in the Tantras that when the Guru speaks, you should listen to the voice of God not to his external personality. The external personality is something, which has to be guarded against. If what a guru says is inconsistent or in conflict with the eternal truths as you have known it, you do not need to obey the guru. The guru is wrong. Mother was saying always that the guru also needs to progress. Unless the guru progresses, he betrays the trust of the disciples in him. He has to grow. And the guru, there is a human personality, there is a deeper personality. The human personality can err, and it does err many times. So we have to be discriminating. And we have to draw from the guru, receive from the guru, but we have to make it our own. So Buddha himself warned his disciples not to take everything that is said as it was, but to make it their own and then proceed. Madame Blavatsky also, she says in some place, I like that thing very much. She said, do not follow me, but follow in the direction in which I am pointing. I think there is a great truth there. The surrender is always to the truth that the guru represents, not to the personality of the guru. Yes.
In that same line, isn't that part of the old tradition where the external nature wasn't transformed, and in the future there would be more of a harmony between in the guru.
Yes.
Because I spent 2 years with a guru who used to do the most crazy things. I mean, and his disciples would surrender to him in a way that, well, they'd say, oh, isn't he, funny or contradictory, or isn't he's teaching us to let go of our concepts. But really, he was just acting like a
I know,
crazy person.
and they would see divine meaning in every stupid thing that
Right. Exactly.
people would do. That is true.
It was almost like he was. It's almost like he was accented by his supposed realization. Like he was almost a little crazier than he normally would have been, because he seemed, every movement he was Shiva's action, and he'd come storming into the kitchen and do something.
These chaotic movements are there because their external nature is not tuned or transformed in terms of the inner realization.
That raises a question that perhaps we don't have time for now, but
Yes, there is time.
the synthesis of yoga that Sri Aurobindo worked out seems to deal largely with a synthesis of tantric and Vedantic methods. And this question of transforming the outer personality seems to be the new element brought about in that synthesis. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could help deepen our understanding of that, of those two methods and their interplay in Sri Aurobindo's yoga.
See, the Vedanta always laid a stress on the soul, the inner Purusha, and taught to separate it from nature, throw out nature, and merge in the soul to merge in the reality. The Tantra, they started with nature and related it to the soul. They gave more importance to the nature. But the type of illumination that nature was expected to receive was not of a very high order. It was within the circle of ignorance. There is a circle of ignorance up to the level of the overmind. So they never thought of a practical operation of divinizing, though they had the vision that heaven would be transplanted on earth. Now that cannot be unless the external nature is equated with the inner soul and transformed in terms of the soul, and the soul assumes its mastery over nature instead of rejecting it. And Sri Aurobindo is synthesizing both these approaches in the light of a third status of combining the two, giving equal importance to both. That was his contribution. The Tantras emphasized on nature, the Vedanta emphasized on the soul. He reconciled both in the light of the divine consciousness.
It seems to deal with a polarity between standing back from experience and identifying with it. The Vedantic method was to objectify and stand back, and that the Tantric was to fully go into whatever the experience was. And that somehow his synthesis acknowledges the importance of both.
Both, exactly. The Tantras, they don't give much importance to the soul. They believe in releasing the potentiality of nature. Nature itself is divine, they say. Nature itself is divine provided you release these hidden powers.
So that in this situation, back to the staying guru, he spoke of having become one with the whole universe, but if it was below the overmind, he's just universalized his ignorance in a sense, and become one with the entire universe.
Yes.
So then the old idea of becoming one with nature is very tricky, because nature itself is not totally transformed.
Yes. That is what, that's the chief defect of Rajneesh's teachings, He says you break your inhibitions and you will become one with nature. But who wants to become one with nature? See, nature as it is a very lower nature. We have to rise into higher nature. And to make it possible to transit from the lower nature to the higher nature, all these disciplines and things have been adopted to leave past the animality and grow into divinity. So the lower nature has to be transformed into higher nature.
Isn't what he's seeking a kind of divinity of the animal, a state of the innocent, like?
But you can't get back that.
You can't get back. It's like the Adam and Eve story. When
yes, you can't get back. You can never go back. You have always to go forward or stagnate.
So there's always a deception in that.
A deception, yes.
Could you speak about the significance of the descent of the supermind on the yoga?
The supermind is a word, it's a term for, truth consciousness. Our consciousness is a mental consciousness. Higher than this are many grades, and the highest is the consciousness of spontaneous consciousness of truth. Now, human evolution is proceeding towards that end, and many seers have worked to establish a link between mental consciousness and the truth consciousness. Today, there is a gradual ingression of the truth consciousness on earth. What has happened, Mother explains, when the highest truth consciousness is descending, there are the intermediate planes with their different kinds of worlds. They are first precipitated on earth, and that is why we are seeing all kinds of deformations from the beginning of the First World War, 1914 onwards. These intermediary worlds of incomplete truths, they have been precipitated, and they are trying to occupy the earth, preventing the fuller manifestation of truth. That is why you see money power is flowing, political power is flowing, all to wrong causes. And there are pseudos. Sri Aurobindo writes in the human cycle, how the advent of the truth age, the truth will be preceded by a number of pseudo teachers, number of teachings, each claiming to be the sole truth, each teacher claiming to be the avatar. But this will only be a sign of the truth descending. And once this truth consciousness, I think Teilhard de Chardin, when he speaks of the Christ's, what is it called, Christosphere, perhaps he means something of that type. The divine God consciousness, when it descends, the forces of disharmony, the forces of falsehood and egoism, they all will recede, and the earth will become slowly, gradually a happier place to live in. It won't happen at a stroke, but one more level of humanity will be added, who will live in that consciousness, and the earth will receive an indirect benefit, just as from the discoveries of science, though they have been done by a small group of scientists, medical, the whole of humanity has benefited. Similarly, by the effort of these spiritual scientists, the whole of humanity will benefit. Lifespan will grow longer, leaves will become greener, the climate will become more temperate, and we are seeing the whole world climates are changing today. We live in a very warm and hot place nearer the equator. The whole, within the last 25 years, the whole thing has changed. It is never so hot. Of course, compared to this place, it is hot, but not what it was 30 years ago.
It's getting cool.
Yes. And Mother had said that with the advent of the truth consciousness nearing the earth or entering the earth, the climatic pattern will change. Life will be prolonged. Diseases will become less. Diseases will become controlled. People will be less cruel to each other. But before that happens, the dregs have come up. Well, they have to be allowed to pass. The two world wars have done so much, they have done harm, but they have done tremendous good work. We are breaking down all the old institutions which would have stood in our way. Today, there is hardly really anybody believes that East is East and West is West. Nobody believes that. Of Rudyard Kipling's famous poem, No. Despite all the appearances, some unity, some oneness, a global consciousness is growing. Particularly if you see the activities of the specialized agencies of the United Nations. I happened to meet Robert Mueller 2 years ago, and I really see they really believe in one world. Every problem arises in the context of one world. So a global approach, a global analysis, and a global consciousness, of which they spoke in 1914, it is being realized today.
It's pretty hard to see that in my real life.
That's true. We are too near what they call the woods. Yes. No. Those who have deeper perception can see it growing. There is a line in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri that God shall grow up while wise men talk and sleep.
When relating to the Tantric and the Vedantic and also the common sense and the idealistic, could that also be said, termed the dynamism between absolute and relative? Is that another way of saying the same thing?
Yeah, I think it can be put in that
The
way.
absolute is always continually being realized
Through the relative, yes.
I was running with one of your awesome children, or not children, he's actually about 19, where the track is not on the track, but out in those villages out there. And we're going through a couple of villages, and he said to stop running, because he said that all the kids get excited and people get excited in the village because they're running, so we walk. I still remember that experience. I was wondering if you have any ideas about that. Whether
I think it's rather crazy.
Isn't Isn't something of the vision of today? You know, the old adage of is the cup half full or half empty? You know, the cup is.
Yes, exactly.
Some people say it's half empty. Some people say
Yes,
it's half full.
yes. It is like
Because
that.
for everyone starving, there's someone else solving a problem too. It seems.
Now, what do we do this evening? Since I have covered what the subject as far as I intended to do, what do we do this evening hour? We will have questions. Meditation, of course. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
The question about what we could do for our children.
Ah, yes.
Here, I would like to.
Yes. I will do that in the evening. That is true.
Some simple guides for daily practice.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I have a probably mundane question about at the beginning of today. You talked about the people whose souls were driven out,
Yes.
and I wonder what becomes of those people, or can the soul ever come back in?
No, it won't come back. It waits for its next incarnation.
Those people are walking and living and doing all.
They are doing everything, yes. But it is some evil beings which are taking the enjoyment of life through them. And they only do harm to everybody. You know, they are embodiments of evil.
You're talking about evil spirits that take over another human
Yeah,
being.
right.
How often does this happen, though?
It does happen. Not too frequently, but happens. Some are partially possessed, some are fully occupied. You know.
Is it obvious?
Too cold.
I mean,
No, you see, it is dangerous because we are inclined to dub everybody who doesn't agree with us. As no, but I think it needs a spiritual perception, an occult sight, to know who is who. We can't do that, and it is not worth trying to know all these things. It doesn't help us, you know.
Have you heard of cryonics?
Uh-huh.
They've been trying this where people die of an illness and they freeze their bodies.
Ah, yes,
And then
yes.
they wait. They think they'll wait till the cure, and then they'll unfreeze their bodies, but the soul is long gone.
No, it won't happen. It can never happen.
But
No, they already bankrupt. The
Yeah, well,
bodies
that
are
one. But
already
they're
out.
trying in other places. Yeah, the first one they tried, they went bankrupt and all the bodies thawed out.
I see.
Terrible mess.
can't a person who's partially possessed wake up and fight that influence?
Pardon?
Can't a person who's partially possessed wake up and fight that influence?
It is possible by grace, by help of a guru, or a one advanced person, one can do it. By good luck, if he suddenly awakes, and by effort he can expel it. But what happens? Number of such people, when they came to our place, and mother saw that they were possessed, by her spiritual power she expelled the occupying being. You understand? And the person became normal. But after a time the person started feeling empty, and he felt I would rather be that, and he would call back. And Jaji said, this is what happens. Unless people are sincere, even if we expel, they call the things back. The stay of that being has created that affinity. So the person doesn't feel comfortable without that. So illness, madnesses, possessions, all these, there is a certain attachment developed.
What is that connected with karma? That possession?
No. It is not connected with karma. It is not. It is always as a result of certain ambitious movements, greed to be what one is really not, and one creates an opening for these evil beings to encourage the person in that evil path. So it is not due to karma, it is by free choice that they do it.